If you find yourself feeling unlovable or fearing abandonment after an abusive relationship, you may have developed an anxious attachment style. Now, the good news is that this is not a character trait that's set in stone. It is something that can change over time, and it's possible to nurture secure and fulfilling relationships even after experiences of abuse and betrayal. My name's Ruth Ann. I'm a clinical psychologist and an expert in relationships and issues of narcissism. And in this video, I'm going to give you practical strategies that you can start implementing today that will help you nurture much more fulfilling and secure relationships. Before we delve into the strategies, it's important to approach this with a spirit of self-compassion. Remember that you are not a self-improvement project. You are a human being. So try to approach this not as looking for your character flaws or the things that you need to work on to become more acceptable. Instead, I want you to try to foster compassion and concern for the ways that you've been hurt and the wounds that you've experienced in your past relationships. Our attachment style evolves over time and it isn't set in stone. It probably arises as a combination of both our nature, our temperament and our genetics, and the experiences that we have throughout our lifespan. There's really interesting research that shows that childhood attachment patterns are only weakly correlated with adult attachment patterns. And I think that really highlights just how important our adult relationships are for the ways that we see ourselves and the ways that we relate to other people. So even if you've had very secure relationships in your childhood and throughout your life, an experience of an abusive relationship can really shatter your view of yourself and your view of relationships. But likewise, your attachment style, even after abuse and betrayal, can be nurtured to become more secure. An anxious attachment style isn't a pathology, and it's associated with strengths like being warm and loyal, intimate and close to people. However, an anxious attachment style can also be associated with a negative view of yourself, a sense of unworthiness or unlovability, or not being capable of taking good care of yourself and coping on your own. If you have an anxious attachment style, you're likely happiest when you're in a relationship, and your relationship will be very, very important to you. But disruptions in your relationships can be extremely distressing. If you are someone with an anxious attachment style and you want to nurture more security in your relationships, here are some strategies that you can start implementing from today that will help you build a much more secure relationship with yourself and also with other people. Step 1 is to understand your own history. Recognize the patterns in your relationships and where they come from. What relational experiences have you had that have given you a negative view of yourself, that have made you think that you're likely to be rejected or seen as not worthy or abandoned? Your relationship experiences may involve relationships with parents or teachers or peers as a child, but it can also involve close friendships and romantic partners and other key relationships as an adult. How have these experiences colored the way that you view yourself and you view other people and you view your relationships? Reflecting in this way can really help you to take a step back and begin to distinguish how your anxiety in your present relationships may actually stem more from past experiences than from anything that's going on in the here and now. Step 2 is to validate your needs. Whilst I'm going to encourage you to develop more autonomy and a sense of self-assuredness that you can lean on and rely on yourself in this world, I also want you to know that your desire for closeness and intimacy isn't a sign of weakness or neediness or any kind of deficiency. It's a core human need. But by getting to know yourself and becoming more autonomous and self-assured, you will be much more able to show up as yourself in your relationships and much more able to let people really get to know you and actually nurture the kind of closeness and intimacy that you crave. And that brings me on to step 3. Evaluate your behaviors. What behaviors do you do in your relationship that might actually inadvertently hinder you from getting your needs met? And remember, this is not about judging or criticizing you. So as we think about some of these behaviors that may actually get in your own way in your relationships, try to look at it through a lens of self-compassion, not a lens of judgment or condemnation. So the kinds of behaviors that might get in your own way might be things like not actually expressing what you think and feel in a relationship because you're concerned the other person might reject you, but then actually they never really get to know you, and so you never really feel seen or understood. If you're someone who asks for a lot of reassurance and contact with your partner, then you may find that your partner becomes overwhelmed and begins to distance themselves from you. And that can further exacerbate your experience of not getting your needs met in your relationships. Another behavior that might get in your way is tolerating bad behavior, not being able to say to a partner what you do or don't like, and even tolerating very hurtful and abusive behavior because you're fearful of being abandoned and alone. You may find that you work very hard to try to win over a partner who's hurting or abusing or devaluing you in some way. And this can mean that you end up staying in relationships where your needs are never going to be met, working ever harder to try to win the person over, and all the time eroding your self-esteem even further. Another common pattern might be being overly jealous if your partner wants space, or clingy if they want to pursue their own interests or friendships outside of the relationship. And again, that can fuel mistrust in a relationship and really erode a potential secure relationship. You may want to take some time to write down these patterns and recognize the behaviors that have really got in the way, because that can help you begin to recognize when those behaviors are happening and start to build alternatives or act differently, so you have a much better chance of creating a secure relationship. Now, step 4 is to build your sense of security and autonomy in yourself. Really get to know yourself, pay attention to your likes and your dislikes, and pursue activities that bring you joy and fulfillment. Think about your life goals and values and the things that are important to you. Really embrace them, give them time and energy and attention. And you may want to look at that list of behaviors and think about ways that you have neglected yourself in the past, areas of your life that perhaps you have under-attended to because you've been so focused on someone else or on relationships, and really put your energy and effort into those things. Step 5 is clear communication. If you have an anxious attachment style, you're likely reluctant to truly express yourself and your feelings in your relationship. So look through the list of behaviors that have got in your way in the past and think about how could you communicate about these things in a way that is calm, non-defensive, collaborative, and direct with a partner. Examples might include openly sharing your values, your preferences, your concerns to foster understanding between you and your partner. And you can do this gradually. You can start by testing the waters by just sharing your opinions about things that are not particularly consequential. So, you can say what music you like, what movies you enjoyed, what food you like, or indeed what you don't like or what you didn't enjoy, and see how other people respond. And in time, you can start to share things that are much more important to you. Maybe your career aspirations, whether you hope to have a family, what your hopes and dreams are for the future. You may particularly need to do this when you are getting close to someone whose values may not be aligned with yours. It doesn't make either of you right or wrong. One of you may want marriage and children, and one of you may not want that for yourself. One of you may want to travel and explore the world, and another may want to be more of a homebody and plant your feet at home. There are no rights and wrongs, but if you're going to get very close to someone and have a close relationship, particularly a romantic relationship with them, then alignment on some of these values is quite essential. So being able to communicate openly about those things, even if it risks losing the relationship, is really, really important. This can be very difficult if you're someone who fears judgment or rejection or abandonment. But I want you to recognize that this is not about you figuring out if you're good enough for this other person or trying to convince the other person to want what you want. This is just an opportunity for you to gather useful information about them and you and the potential for your relationship. Now, sometimes when I suggest this strategy to people, they will go off and put it into practice and then they'll say, oh, it really hasn't worked. So for example, they may say to a date that what they really hope to do is to get married and have children. And then the person that they're on a date with is scathing or criticizes them or says that's so traditional. Why would you want that? They may put them down for that. I would suggest that far from not working, clear communication has worked extremely well in this situation because it actually allows you to establish the differences between you and the other person and the potential for the relationship. Now, you may not get good news. It may be that this relationship doesn't have much potential if you're not aligned on core values or the other person is dismissive or critical of your wants and needs and desires. Knowing that early can save you from a lot of heartache. As you get closer to someone, you may find that your anxious attachment actually intensifies. You may, for example, find yourself getting jealous or suspicious about them, or doubting yourself or doubting the relationship. You may find you actually become more clingy and demanding. Now, being able to communicate with someone directly, without defensiveness, without attacking them, can be incredibly helpful and create almost magical opportunities for connection. But it takes a lot of courage. So for example, rather than surreptitiously checking your partner's phone if you have suspicions about them, or making excuses about why they shouldn't go out with certain friends or they shouldn't spend time away from you, you could actually tell them quite directly that you have past experiences in which you've been betrayed or cheated on or hurt in your relationships. And so you're finding yourself getting anxious when you're apart from them. Now, you can also be saying to them that you recognize that this is coming from past experiences and isn't something that they've done. If you can do this calmly from a position of being a healthy, secure adult who is confident in yourself, who recognizes and doesn't apologize for having needs, that can actually come across as really confident, and it can create opportunity for the other person to respond with empathy and concern, and for the two of you to come up with strategies that can actually help nurture more security in your relationship. So for example, your partner might suggest that they just send you a text message and check in with you when they're out, or that they're careful to let you know if for any reason they're running late, so you're not at home worried and wondering where they are. And this can really help to create a relationship where both of your needs are met, where you get comfort and reassurance, where you actually become better at tolerating uncertainty and discomfort rather than engaging in overbearing behaviors that will ultimately hurt your relationship. But even if it doesn't go well and your partner is dismissive or critical, whilst that might not be such good news for your relationship, it's incredibly valuable information that you need to pay attention to and act on. And doing so may be difficult, but it will also strengthen your confidence in yourself, that you can handle yourself, that you can be true to yourself, and that you won't put yourself in situations where you're in relationships where you're being hurt, abused, and your needs are consistently not being met. Step 6 is to nurture multiple relationships. Now, I don't mean with multiple partners, I mean with multiple friends and family. For some people with an anxious attachment, there can be a real tendency to want one person to be that special someone, but that can make you overly reliant on that person and really create a lot of anxiety about losing that very special relationship. Nurturing multiple relationships gives you the chance to experience different ways of relating to people. It will give you much more security and allow you to have the experience of your needs being met in different kinds of relationships. That can really take the pressure off your romantic relationship. And knowing that you have the friendship, the backup, the support of a community around you can make it much more possible to take risks in your very close relationship, to risk rejection by simply being yourself. And hopefully you actually end up in relationships where you are fully yourself with someone who really appreciates and admires and loves you just for being you. But you also know that if you end up in a relationship with someone who doesn't appreciate and value you for just being you, that you would actually be willing to negotiate or move on. I'd love to know, in thinking about this, what are your experiences with navigating an anxious attachment style? Which of these strategies are you going to implement today? So let me know in the comments if you feel comfortable to. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you're not sure to what extent this video applies to you and whether there's other things going on in your attachment patterns, you might want to check out my other video, which I will link to at the end, which explores attachment patterns in more detail. Don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe if you want more information about how you can heal and recover your relationships after abuse. And I look forward to seeing you next time. In the meantime, take good care.